to speak. Helen's had a fairly big year, which is going to encapsulate into this program, or this session next. Helen was, in her time in Melbourne, became part of one of our state executive committees and became heavily involved with ALPMA there for a couple of years. So we've been able to keep in touch with Helen and appreciate her being able to rearrange her schedule to be with us in Singapore today. So I welcome and thank Helen Tung.
Well, hello ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be here and I really want to thank ALPMA for having me here. Now, the topic that I want to talk to you about is about lawyering, AI, knowledge management, and what's interesting is the theme is about getting a seat on the table. But I want to premise on this idea, well, what if you don't want to sit on those tables? You want to create your own table. That is also a possibility. So I'm going to share with you a lot of stories that I've gone through over the last 10 months, which have been very much life-changing. So about 2 years ago, I came back to Australia from London, being a litigation lawyer. I describe myself as a firefighter because that's what litigation lawyers do. They put out fires and save lives. And being away from the rat race, I had quiet time to think about what is it that I do? What is it that you do? And then I realized, I spent a lot of time thinking about the future legal problems. In fact, 5 years ago, I started looking at unmanned systems, collision avoidance, unmanned cars, you name it. 5 years ago, there was not a single lawyer I could talk to about this topic. Now everyone's talking about it. And in fact, Google Cars has made car collision cases sexy, which I think is quite an achievement. Now, when I started on this journey, I thought maybe I could call myself a legal futurist. And so I did that. Now, if you Google legal futurist, you will find a lot of things. But at that time, I didn't even Google. I just thought, this is a term I describe myself. But actually, it doesn't matter what you call yourself, because you only have a title so that other people know what you're about. But you know what you're about. Now, I bring a quote from Nikola Tesla, and I actually had the opportunity to go to his hometown. Let the future tell the truth and evaluate each one according to his work and accomplishments. The present is theirs. The future for which I have worked is mine. I really resonated with this because for the time that I spent and worked on, say, liability issues of unmanned systems, which is only current in the last few years and currently on an international being thought about and actually worked on, it is quite a sense of achievement in my own way. So I invite you all on this journey of tackling the future, asking the deeper question. Why do you do what you do? What are you about? What drives you? What motivates you? Because by asking those questions, you come to a truth and then you come to a clearer truth. Now, this is the interesting part. Are you the 98% of the population that is like everyone else? You're just trying to survive, be it personally or in the firm. You're in your comfort zone, you're fearful of the future, of the technologies taking over your jobs. Are you having a double life? Are you just playing it safe? You're procrastinating work you don't want to talk about, you have regrets, and you have things that, you just like, okay, I'll settle for less. It's less difficult. Or do you have the 2% mentality and say, I'm going to go for my dream. I'm going to have the confidence to do it. I'm going to explore new things. I'm going to choose happiness over convenience. And I'm going to embrace the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm excited about the future. I like change. And I'm going to do it without any limitation. There's abundance. And you know what? I can tell you right now, this is the startup mentality. So I'm going to premise that rather than lawyers being slow adopters and say that, you know what? Lawyers are actually early adopters. So does anyone know this guy here? His name's got Kay Kurzweil. Thank you. So I spent a few months in Silicon Valley based with Singularity University, which was founded by Kay Kurzweil. Now, you'll know LexisNexis, right? You'll use it for case studies and document research and whatnot. Well, it was Kay who in the 1970s developed the technology and sold it to LexisNexis. So my argument is, you know what? Lawyers are early adopters without even knowing that they were. And I highly recommend the book, The Singularity is Near. So Kay was my mentor for a few months. And the book is amazing. It is written about 30 years ago, but it is so relevant now. Automation, AI, so have a look at that book. And now I'm going to talk to you about Moore's Law. Now, who knows about Moore's Law? Oh, wonderful. Okay. So I wouldn't really need to repeat myself. But for those in the room who, bring it up to speed. So if you look at this diagram, it basically is going from history to the present day. So we start off with agriculture, then we talked about, industrial revolution, light bulbs, landing on the moon, to the point of about, human genome. So it's looking at human progress. Now, if we look about, second point about exponential growth and computing power, this is where we're seeing the changes, not just in the legal profession, but the whole world. So we start off with, the old technologies, and if you recall the first computer that you had, how slow it was, how much memory and data it had, and how much it cost. But now, when you look at the changes and over time, it's quite common to change a phone, even within months. Get a new laptop every year, and it's at an exponential speed. So what does that mean? Well, if we look according to this graph, then we see that about 2015 to 2023 to 2024, 2045, basically, machines are going to be smarter than us. Now, for some people, that's a really fearful thought. For others like me, it's such an exciting thought. Now, we've heard about Clayton Christensen, and I want to say it was such a delight to meet this gentleman and his wife. They spoke at a conference full of startups in the room, VCs, and it was amazing to hear him talk because, you know what, he is the godfather, I call him the godfather, of disruptive innovation, disruption. And in fact, he has written so many books that are truly inspiring. How will you measure your life? In fact, he's also a preacher, so there's a real strong religious side to him, the power of everyday missionaries. But for the whole hour and a half, he didn't speak about disruptive innovation. In fact, he talked about life. He talked about values. He talked about choices that you make every day in your life. So if I may, I'll use the example which I think stunned the whole room. He said before he was a professor at Harvard, he was working as a businessman in a job. And his boss said to him, you know what, Clayton, can you just work this Saturday? Just this one time. Just this one time. Just once. He went back home, spoke to his wife. He goes, we don't do Saturdays. We keep our Saturdays free. We've got family. We've got family time. So he goes back to his boss and says, look, I just don't do Saturdays. So the boss said, well, how about Sundays? Come on, just once, just Sunday. He goes back home and talks to his wife again. And, no, we don't do Sundays. We go to church. So he goes back to his boss and says, look, I don't do Sundays. And obviously you can imagine this conversation going on. So he made the choice to quit his job and become a professor at Harvard. Now, I want to thank him because had he not done that, he wouldn't have written about disruptive innovation. But he clearly has identified this notion of work-life balance, identified this notion of, why are businesses run that way? And this is where I think his contribution to society is on this notion of disruptive innovation. So what he says is a disruptive innovation is not a breakthrough innovation that makes good products a lot better. So it is not about improving on something that's already there. And I think already learnt to is this idea of basically a non-player who never existed, you've never heard of, suddenly enters the market, does their own thing, beats the competition by a mile, and gets the traction that everyone else in the industry has been trying for years and decades to do. Now, the quote that Christensen gave to the audience, which I think is a very memorable one, is he said, we never have a strategy for the consequences of the success that we have. And the context of that quote was he said that back then when he went to his high school reunions, everyone in their 30s was doing so well. They got married, new job, promotion, holidays. But for some reason, the next time they did a 10-year anniversary, people got divorced, depression, lost everything, bankruptcy. It's like, what's going on? What is going on? So I think Clayton Christensen is a businessman, but I think he's got some core values that he can teach us all. Even if you're going to bust your gut to be a successful lawyer, have some balance whilst you're at it. So my favorite case study is Tesla. So I was in Silicon Valley for a few months, and I was in awe visiting SpaceX and Tesla. I mean, trust me, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I couldn't stop gazing at the rockets, right? And Tesla is a good example of disruption. Because think about it. Were they ever in the scene that people knew of 15 years ago? No. But now they're everywhere. And do you know what? They're more expensive than GM, but they're more popular than any other brand. So to give you an example, I did my own case study. Every Saturday, I'll go cycling for a few hours in Silicon Valley just to check out the neighborhood. And there'll be one main street in San Jose full of car, manufacturers and showrooms. So I just jumped out, went to a Tesla showroom, played around, got the customer service, chose my own colored seats, add a booster feature, I thought this is brilliant. This is make your own design car. You have a real sense of ownership on it. Then I go down the street, check out a few other, car providers. I just didn't feel the same. But what they were trying to push for was electric cars. They were, by the way, we have electric cars. I'm like, are you guys trying to copy Tesla? But what's interesting is this very concept of disruption is where the old players are now looking at the new players and saying, what are they getting right? What have we done wrong? What have we haven't been doing? So that is, for me, a real learning curve, that there's so much we can learn from each other, even though we might think, hey, they're an insignificant new player. But the thing about Tesla is it's not just about cars, right? It's about policies. It's about electric energy. It's about battery. When you go to a showroom, and I don't know how many of you do and go to their sales booth, you look at the customers sitting there so happy, charging their electric car and having a cup of coffee. I feel it's like, when your friends get together and you have a chat. That was the kind of experience that they gave me. So I'm going to ask the next best question. So who is going to disrupt Tesla? So Walden University made a study, and they had identified a number of issues that could potentially disrupt Tesla. One of them being, smaller cars or multi-purpose vehicles. Or you have 3D printing. I don't know, in the future, anyone's got this idea of printing 3D cars, so you could potentially make your own car. Online universities, innovation explosion. We just don't know what the potential is. You've got these young kids who know how to program before they even know how to write an essay, right? You've got the hydrogen revolution. You've got this discussion about raw metals in China could cause stability, new technologies. So if you look at this, actually disruption is not just a very narrow, specific point of view. It's actually looking at the bigger picture and looking at what's going on in the industry. Now, the next slide is very close to my heart. Now, who plays Go? Hands up, okay. Who plays chess? Who plays any board game? Okay, thank goodness. So as we were all kids, we used to play some sort of board game, snakes and ladders and whatnot. So when I was a kid, I used to play Go, this black and white checkered board, because my father used to represent Australia to play Go. Not many people know that. And his ambition was for his daughter to become a Go champion. Clearly, that never happened. But so when AlphaGo came on board, I was like, oh my gosh, look at the technology. So it rekindled my interest. And so I started looking at it. And you know what? Go is a very complicated game. If you think chess is hard, Go is just clearly a lot harder. So how does it work? So it is a bit like your overly ambitious, warrior, island conquering mentality. You want to get as many of your colors, be it black or white, on that board, and you eat up the other person's. It sounds easy, but these kind of games can go on for hours. So we talked about strategic, decision and tactics, and it's actually very relevant because if you look at it from a board game perspective, and by the way, I have to mention, I think this game used to be played in the Tang Dynasty as a, like a war strategy game by the military officials. Before you even start the game, you might be thinking, okay, so do I want to tackle the corner, the sector, the niche? Do I want to hog the center and be in the middle of the game? Because you make choices as to where you place your bets. No different from what you're trying to do right now in your firm as to where you position yourself in this market, right? And so I come up with this idea, actually it's very relevant to game theory, because there are so many choices, and for each decision that you make can impact on the next decision or the consequences of that decision. So I grab a quote from a computer scientist called Victor Alice, and he looks at all this game tree complexity, right? One choice has maybe ABC consequences, and from that consequence, ABC consequences. And he's analyzed that for experts in the room who plays chess, it usually takes about 150 moves. And for each move, there are about 250 options. Now, you're taking a breath right now probably and thinking, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to make such complicated decisions in my life, right? You just make a simple decision. Am I going to buy this product or not buy this product? Am I going to take this client in or not take this client in? But just to give you an idea that, it is quite complicated, that the choices that we have to make, because we don't actually sit there and all have the time to think about all the variables of the consequences we're going to make, right? For most part, we just hope we're going for the right decision, and then, let nature and, consequences take it out. So now I'm going to move on to the next subject. Because there is so much information right now, so, you're bombarded by social media, you're bombarded with all these technologies, how do you even make decisions? So I'm going to go on a sort of slightly higher level right now and talk about, we all talk about memory in the cloud, documents that are uploaded. So just bear with me for a moment. I was at the IBA conference earlier this year, and I also spoke about law firm management and heard a few partners talking and, complaining about what issues are you facing. One partner goes, you know what, I just can't talk to my other partners. They're so busy. We're trying to pitch, and then, they do something totally different. But then I thought, hey, wait a moment. What if your partner can read your mind? Right? What if you can actually upload your memory? That part of that pitch, don't rehearse it, just upload it, and then your colleague can just read it. That's a thought, isn't it? And then there was another Singaporean lawyer I had met a few years ago, and he was in New Zealand for a few weeks. And I said to him, how do you run your firm when you're away for a few weeks? He goes, Helen, I've trained my associates so they think like me. And again, so, okay, well, not everyone has that talent, not everyone can actually build that relationship. But so what if you can upload that kind of, this is how I work and this is how I'd like people to work with me. So this idea of chips in the brain is not just, futuristic. It's actually this idea of, it's actually being developed. So recently I was at NTU visiting their department, and they had a magazine, I think it was an alumni magazine. I opened it up. So some Korean scientists are actually putting chips in tortoise brains. And what they're trying to do is basically make the turtle think, not like a human, but think how the human would think. So let's say I'm the human being, and I'm going back. I'm the human being, and I want to go left. So then the turtle actually identifies that and would go left. Now, whether you think it's a scary thought, it's an exciting thought, it's, for me, a very exciting thought, because it actually shows you the potential that we have in terms of communication, and it's not just written communication. So then the next thing I'm going to go is talk about hologram meetings of the future. Now, right now, we all struggle with timetables, particularly if you're an international firm or we've got international clients. How do you link and sync everyone up together? Now, wouldn't it be great if we were all in the same room, just like this? Well, IBM is actually looking at this, and where in the future, probably travel will be redundant. So in the future, we don't travel. We basically sit in the comfort of our sofa, in our meeting room, and we get to see each other in person. So you have to use a bit of imagination right now. Just pretend we're not here, but we are physically sitting around the table. And in fact, this use of VR and AR is so powerful, so powerful. Have you guys watched The Tree? The Tree, or you've put on AR, VR technology? Okay, great. I encourage you all to just give it a try. It's not the stuff that you watch in archives. It's actually used a lot, particularly with startups, to promote their businesses. You want to go on a holiday. Why don't you put on a set of VR and see how it's like to be on a cruise? If you want to sell a product, you want to sell like a kitchen with movable parts, create a VR video. Let your customer interact with you and see how it's like. Now, law firm and legal advice is going to be a bit difficult, but you get the feel. So there was one young girl from Silicon Valley. She developed a VR, basically putting on these headsets to experience the life of a tree. Now, you're going to ask me, what is the point of living the life of a tree? Well, I tell you what, she won a lot of awards. She touched a lot of people, and many people that watch this actually end up crying. That is touching at the heart of people. Why? Because you grow from a sap, a seed, growing into nature. Let's say, imagine the Amazon with bees and trees and, animals coming and hugging you, to the point that you actually go on fire. And you can actually see people trying to get rid of the fire because it feels so real, right? They're being burnt down to the point that you're no longer in existence. And that emotional experience made people think, you know what, maybe we should care more about the environment. Maybe we should be doing more. Now, whether you think, oh, okay, it's just toys, just like, a film, to promote the environment is one thing. But to get people starting to talk about it and go, hey, wait a moment, I actually feel emotionally affected by being in the life of a tree, actually says something. So this is something that I think is going to be very progressive and something maybe some firms might come to use. Now, this is one of my favorite subjects. So to give you an idea, a bit of context of where I was before I came here, I really struggled 5 years ago because I had a lot of ideas that I think honestly were just rubbished by my fellow lawyers. When I talked about unmanned systems, I said it 5 years ago, some lawyers would say, Helen, just get back to work, okay? And I can say right now, so the first thing I did was that when I was in Europe earlier this year, I said, you know what? Hey guys, I need to go to a place where I can talk to people and I just want to get my ideas either really rubbished or validated. So I thought, where is the best place I can go to? It must be Silicon Valley. That's where all the crazy ideas come from. So there I go, pack my bags, I go to Silicon Valley. I have no idea whether they're going to like me, hate me, whatever. So I go there and I sit next to this Japanese guy and I say, so what do you do? He goes, I do teleportation. I'm like, oh, okay. Do you believe in time traveling? Yes. For 3 months, that was the kind of conversations I was having, okay? And it was life-changing because I believe in that, okay? Now, this guy, his business is called Geitai. He has got so much funding, you won't believe it, right? An engineer graduate, worked in a few years and did his own startup. This is his life's work. It's this idea of, right now, if you need to go to the doctor, have surgery in Singapore, you go to a hospital and you get operated on. Let's say for a moment, you have this certain disease or you're relative to a certain disease and there's a specialist doctor, right, in USA, but there's not enough time to fly him over to Singapore to operate on your loved ones, right? His technology will enable that, right? Just imagine for a moment, you've got a patient and you need him operated, but the best surgeon that could deal with it is in the US. So what you do is you teleport the operation. Basically, he puts on these gadgets, it's all linked up, synced up with the hospital, technology, and he does his job. He's literally operating on the patient via a robot, assisted robot. Now, if it helps humanity, why not? You might ask. If it's going to save lives, why not? So when you look at these kind of technologies, I would invite people to have a more open mind. Rather than saying, is it just a flimsy toy? It's actually got a lot of functions for the future. Now, this is an interesting one. You might recognize the chap behind here. So he is one of the most renowned robotics professors in Osaka. Now, you might be questioning, can you figure out who's the real and who's the sort of twin? So he basically developed this idea from a social well-being aspect. As you all know, in Japan, there's a huge aging population. There's not enough people around, and of course, there's a lot of elderly people in nursing homes. So he initially thought, okay, well, what if we can basically create, nurses and animals, that would accompany them? So it's a very simple concept, right? And then he developed his own avatar, and of course many others, including secretaries. So in the future, you could hypothetically have a robotic secretary greeting your customers and looking very real, right? So here you could clearly tell, the robotic on the left and then the real person on the right. Will this be the future? Will in the future you will have an avatar? You will have not a twin exactly, but you basically have an assistant, a double me, that would attend this conference and another conference and meet all the other clients that you've always wished for, because 24 hours is never enough. So it's food for thought because there are ideas and concepts on this. So for example, right now we're at the first stage, Avatar A, where we're basically trying to understand our body remotely. So I talked about the Geitai teleportation. Maybe Avatar B, an upgrade, would be the transplant. So it's an interesting concept. Will we actually live forever? That's a big question. Who believes we can actually live forever? Okay, I still got a bit of convincing to do. So this idea of, let's say for a moment, if your intelligence, who you are, is uploaded onto a cloud, onto a chip, does it matter whether you're physically here or not? No, right? I mean, just bear with me for a moment. I'm being devil's advocate, right? Clearly, your intelligence is retained. So all it is just you're having a replacement of a body, but your brain is still there, right? And your intelligence is still there, and you can still pass it on. So this is the idea of the avatar. So I think it's Ghost in the Shell, I think it was one of the animations, that has a similar idea, that your intelligence can all be wrapped up and contained. Avatar C obviously then goes further, artificial brain intelligence, and then the hologram-like avatar. So this is very much sci-fi. Now I move on to that question. So Kay is a very interesting chap. He's a futurist, and he believes that in the inevitability of living forever. Trust me, there's no alcohol involved. But you just need to bear for a moment. And logically, it makes sense. If for each generation we live another 15 years longer, i.e. my children live 15 years longer, their children live 15 years longer, so you add the sums up, 15 plus 15 plus X, we live forever. There was a company that came in called 23andMe that offered DNA testing. So me being me thinking, should I give it a try? What are they going to test me on? Well, the most basic testing, you could do your whole genome, but the basic testing is actually 6 features. How long are you going to live? Are you going to live longer than the average? The quality of your skin, your caffeine intake, how intelligent are you in terms of learning languages? And I forget the other 2. So, lo and behold, I was really struggling, by the way. All these law, ethical questions, what they're going to do with my data. But then I thought, you know what? I'm in Silicon Valley. Why not? So I gave them a few swabs of my, cells, and I got the results via email. I was so nervous. I don't even know why. I opened the results. So I'm going to live longer than the average. But then I thought, you know what? I think I already know that because, I exercise and eat well. Then they say, my language ability is average. I kind of know that already as well. But what was interesting was another girl from Argentina, she did it, and she goes, Helen, I speak 6 languages fluently, and I'm just average. Can you imagine if someone's really intelligent? I'm like, yeah, that's a good thought. And then quality of skin, so, youthful skin, but then, hey, I think it might be an Asian trait. And so it's very interesting. So we come to a point where we're actually getting to know ourselves better by knowing our DNA. So all this idea about, Myers-Briggs and, what's your personality and can we work together as a team? Maybe in the future, just do a DNA test. I know it's extreme, okay? I know it's extreme. There's a lot of, ethical and data consent issues, but I think it's food for thought because, in some ways your DNA doesn't lie, to a certain extent. And now we go on to the social media scene. So I want to premise it like this. Right now, some of you might be feeling overwhelmed. Some of you might be feeling, this whole, AI, it's been going on for a long time, but now it's really happening. Now I'm really feeling the pinch. All these firms are talking about this, they're all doing that. But if I can give you any comfort whatsoever, is at the end of the day, we're all unique. We may not feel that way sometimes. We might just feel we're just trying to blend into the crowd and just do the best that we can. But I want to say that we are actually very unique individuals, just as your firms are very unique. At the IBA conference, after, talking to hundreds of lawyers and, different roundtables, it came down to, well, what needs you have depends on what kind of firm you are, right? So, there's no point, buying a massive mansion, but if you're a one-man sole practitioner, and likely it wouldn't work the other way around, if you have a small hut and you're actually like a 10-mansion building, law firm. So it kind of makes sense that even with all the hype, it wouldn't really affect us if we know who we are. Because if we know who we are, and I think it was alluded to this morning, knowing our values, knowing where we're coming from, knowing what we can offer, I love the unique selling point. I'm still trying to figure out what mine is. Then you will naturally attract the people that you want to meet. So if I may, take the liberty of sort of coming back to me as an example. So I really struggled with the litigation world because I asked myself, how am I adding value? And I can tell you right now, not a lot of barristers ask themselves that question. They do the opposite. They think it's so great and they add all the value they can possibly give in a court case, right? But then I took a step back and I thought, what is my impact in life? One case, one client at a time. I thought, is that it? That was the deeper question I was asking myself. Is that it to life? And I thought, but you know what? But what if I can impact on other people to do amazing things? And they go on to do amazing things. Now, I liked that. So going to Silicon Valley changed my life in that way. Even though I was only there for 3 months, but can you imagine the kind of conversations I was having? The technologies I was learning about, the people, the stuff that they're out there is just phenomenal. There is a cure to cancer. It's just that it hasn't been regulated by the authorities. There are people working on greening deserts. I think Australia tried to do that in the 1970s. How can you green, the Northern Territories and actually make it into an ecosystem? There are people developing these technologies. There's development of synthetic meat, where people can grow meat at home in laboratories, so you don't have cows producing carbon dioxide. So this whole discussion about CO2 is gone, out the window. So there are very innovative ideas out there which are in the pipeline, but then there's a question of how receptive are we? Are we willing to open our ears and say, look, I'm not going to judge, I'm just going to listen and see what people have got to say, because whilst it may not, on the face of it, appear to affect me, it may. So to sort of wrap it up and sort of give you a sort of good ending to my story, so I got more than I bargained for when I went to Silicon Valley. I'm actually in the process of doing my own startup. And of all sectors, it's actually on space, okay? So I met a rocket scientist and I met a serial entrepreneur. He's very young, 20-something, and he's a millionaire. He knows his stuff, let's just put it this way. It's one of those moments where it's like this kind of crowded room and you see someone at the back corner, you're like, I want to talk to them. So we talk, we engaged, and we clicked. the value system, our personalities, we knew we had to do something together. It was incredible. That synergy was amazing. A few months in, we developed a business plan, a pitch, we're approaching VCs, and the best bit is we entered this competition called Space Masters in Luxembourg. So some of you may or may not know this, but the Luxembourg government passed a law to allow for asteroid mining. So any private company that goes up there and mines an asteroid, you can keep it. So this is my thinking. I'm thinking about how do I impact as a lawyer with my knowledge. I know space is a blue ocean. Litigation is living with the shark tanks, okay? Living in the shark tank, right? So what if I could impact the development of space law and policy, okay? Pie in the sky, yes. But hey, it is true. If there is SpaceX, if there is asteroid mining, if there is 3D printing, if there is mining water on asteroids, basically there is so much potential. But right now, we don't have the law. And the best bit is, it doesn't just benefit me. It benefits everyone that I talk to. Because like all good law and legislation, it has to be international. So every jurisdiction counts. Singapore, Malaysia, everyone counts. And so with that in mind, my team and I were in the semi-finals, or in the sort of finals, one of the 4 finalists to be invited by the Luxembourg government to pitch to them in a week's time, i.e. next Sunday. So I'm terribly excited. But I don't know what's going to happen. I think I need to be very clear about that. Whether we're going to succeed or not is secondary. But what I'm trying to engage is, I'm doing my best to live in the 2%, where we put our fears aside and say, you know what, let's take the courage and try something new, right? We don't have to wait until the technology comes out. We don't have to wait until someone says, oh, why don't we try something innovative? Just try it. I think we've got that. You learn and try and learn. There's no such thing as failure. And I think failure is such an overdone concept. I was in Malaysia, in Sarawak, working on a microfinance project, working with 2 locals, Iban people, and by the way, they were former headhunters until the 1970s, I think. Trying to help their communities so that they can get access to clean water via solar panel energy, And I was working with a Dutchman, and what was really fascinating was he looked at this project and goes, piece of cake. We go in, we talk to the communities, they answer 2 questions, we exit. It was not that easy at all. You go into the village, you're greeted by the head of village, they invite you for tea, you sit there, you talk for an hour, about their farm, their yield, their cat, their dog. Because what are you trying to do? You're trying to gain trust. You're coming in as a foreigner. You need to go into the community. They have a lot to share with you, but they don't want you to just come and get information and go. So we had this conversation about failure and success, because I'm sure you guys think about it a lot of the time. What criteria do you give yourself as an individual, as a firm? What does success mean? What does failure mean? What does not meeting the mark mean? And I remember sitting on the sofa, him going, Helen, I never fail. And I'm like, oh, really? I fail all the time. For half an hour, we're talking like this, right? And then afterwards, I was like, this is incredible. Why is it I fail all the time? He never. But do you know what happened? He quit the project before it finished because he couldn't handle it. He was like, this is a waste of time. We're not getting anything out of it, blah, blah, blah. But what I learned was immense. I learned happiness from the Iban people. I learned how important the strength of community is. So right now, we are a community. We talked about culture. We talk about leadership. But it's the little things that count. It's the little details that count. And I loved that story about, the difference between Nostrum, delivering those shoes to the customers personally. And I think for me, I also realized that's probably my unique selling point as well, working with people directly. So from litigation, what I realized is I was working with people on very low vibration. By that I mean people who are usually in a crisis situation who don't have really good stories to share with you. It's either I'm being bankrupt, or they're going to sue me, or etc., etc. But in the startup world, there is no limit to their imagination. In fact, the crazier the idea, the more investors are happy to talk to them. And I would say that these are the people that are my ideal clients, because I love working with ideas, and I got validation when I went to Silicon Valley. And I can tell you right now that it is such a huge breakthrough for me personally to be able to do this. And if anyone else wants to give it a try, do it, because you will have no regrets. You will have no regrets in just giving it a try. And I told myself, the worst case scenario is they all say, Helen, you got shit ideas, sorry. I'll be the boring lawyer that I need to be to, earn a living. But actually, what they gave me was this empowerment that age doesn't matter, your knowledge of technology certainly doesn't matter. Your finances doesn't matter because someone likes your idea. You have nothing, to hold back on. So as a parting thought, I will end with this story. So as part of my sort of space law journey, I went to UNOSA, the Office of Outer Space, and I was part of a delegation, Space Generation Advisory Council, which is a bunch of space enthusiasts, lawyers, and young professionals. And I sat next to this lady, and I said, "Oh, so what do you do?" She goes, "Well, I sell tickets to Mars and space." I said, "Oh, so how much does it cost?" $100,000. And we have a waiting list. I was like, my God, this is a business model. And he works with Richard Branson, by the way. So what I'm trying to say is surprise yourself. In a business that you think is not doable, in a pitch that doesn't work, trust me, there are people out there that would love those ideas that perhaps you think aren't any good to anyone. So part of me being here is to say, I am also part of my own experiment. I am also curious how far my ideas are going to take me, whether it's in the legal industry, whether it's in the startup world. I know clearly that these technologies need law to enable them to do whatever they need to do. Vice versa, I know lawyers need to understand the technology to enable them to do what they want to do. So you could say, in a way, I'm sort of like the diplomat in between the two, trying to share the information and get everyone engaged in that conversation, because we can't live with one without the other. So finally, that's my story, and thank you very much.